Greetings and welcome back to another iteration of MGTOW Talks. And today I have a very special guest. I am here with the Lord of the Evocative and Provocative, that ninja from the Southern Hemisphere gets to enjoy the frosty wind while I have to burn under the blazing sun. None other than Spetsnaz himself. Welcome to MGTOW Talks. Obviously we've talked a lot privately, but it's nice to be talking to you in the public forum. Tell us about how winter is. I'm so envious of you.
Well, the weather is pretty cool down here. I think I'm more favourable with the hotter weather than the colder weather. But I think we're sort of polar opposites in that respect.
I'm kind of a freak. Everyone just doesn't understand. But I wish I were in the Southern Hemisphere now. Yeah. But what we're going to be talking about today is basically women after the red pill. How we approach the topic of women, and of course, dating, essentially rekindled interest in women, because it's a natural instinct we have, it's a natural feeling we have as men, and so it's a topic that actually doesn't get talked about too much. I mean, superficially, one hears about dating and what have you. But the actual details and how it's all sort of processed differently after you've been going your own way for an extended period of time, how that differs, for example, from before when we were blue pillars. So I'm going to actually let Spetsnaz take over now and just let him tell us and me about his experiences and the sort of transformation he might have undergone in this regard.
Sure. Well, I think I said in a previous discussion with Gregory Becker that I was looking at entering the dating world again. If seeking out a relationship may or may not be on the cards, but certainly interacting with women again has certainly been on the forefront of my mind. For a period of time, I'd say probably 6 to 8 months, I've taken a step back from relationships and interacting with women. The reason I did that was because I was replaying a lot of repetitive behavior, going for the same kind of woman, the type of tattoos and all the baggage that comes with it. So, I talked in my very first video. I talked about I came from sort of a hookup culture. That's not PUA, but it's, if you had an urge, you acted on that urge. If you approached a girl in the bar, she understood what you were after, and you went from there. So it was a social group that I grew up in. It was also the progress through life. You go through different stages. I know that prior to me leaving the previous field that I was in a wide social group with a lot of women, a lot of other males as well. But as a result of that, I had access to a lot more sex and a lot more female validation, a lot more, options in that regard. But stepping back from that field, I've gone into a different area. So I've lost contact with a lot of those people. And as a result, I find that I've been treated in a much different manner, not only by women, but also men. I know I've related this to you before. But going back into the dating world, if we can call it that now, I'm going in without any kind of social proofing. I'm going in without any sort of female validation or validation from that kind of social group. So I'm going in there cold, essentially. So it's a matter of trying to create attraction, as opposed to, I don't know, there was this validation there that I could act on. So in that regard, it's different. I don't know if that's sort of been your experience, but it's certainly been eye-opening how people have reacted to me in this regard.
I think the idea of dating, which to me always seemed very American, or maybe it's just in English-speaking countries in general, this idea of going on a date, I've never really done that per se, and certainly not in my advanced MGTOW years. But yes, I too have in recent months I guess you could say, rekindled interest in women to some degree, at least. But unlike you, I've never been particularly social to that degree. I've always been a loner, and I don't formally meet up with women or have no interest in doing that, to be honest. But certainly the interest is there, and this is an important point that I think when you take the red pill, when you go your own way, all of us, to varying degrees, we take a step back. We just kind of take a step back. We reflect. For the past 4 years, running the channel, I've taken that step back. I haven't really had any interest in women. I mean, I was just totally, essentially asexual. I just didn't care. I didn't want to talk to them. And for the most part, I still don't want to talk to them. Depends on the specific context and the specific woman. But eventually, it's just as surely as night follows day, I guess. It's a bit of an instinct. And
what sort of brought you to this point? The point you're at now?
I think it has a lot to do with actually knowing what I want in a quote-unquote relationship, if you want to use the term. Relationship, whatever you want to call it. Usually they are relationships, so. But, yeah, I think just knowing in a very well-defined manner on a personal level what I want out of interaction with women. And the only way I got to this point is, going through late teens and the decade of the 20s and my early and mid-30s, having experienced things. And then, of course, the 30s, my mid-30s were probably the total conversion from purple pill, which was kind of early 30s, to red pill. Understanding the way women are and knowing basically after all of that what would work for me, what I want. I mean, for example, in summary, it's basically a combination of general life experience, and in addition to that, of course, the experience of going my own way and learning all about female nature. I mean, to the point where I can say, I know the way women are, I know their nature, I know the way they operate, I know the way I am as an individual, I know myself in a general sense as a man, as a male, and as unreasonable as, I don't really have expectations so much as I have rules that I apply to my interaction with women. So there's certain things I don't tolerate. Not in the sense that I'm a dictator, so you cannot. But if I interact with women, and this isn't just in a romantic sense, which is my romantic interaction with women is almost non-existent. But anytime I have extended interaction with women, I'm careful. I listen to what they have to say. I listen how they react to my views and how I perceive things. And yeah, that's kind of how I roll in that regard.
You had an interaction with a female recently, and but into that was it's a fairly strong one. I don't know how that played out, but I think it was that reaction. It was saying, "Look, here's my boundary. I'm not prepared to put up with that."
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't want to go into the details, but this had no romantic context really. But this was essentially someone that I was on friendly terms with, and intelligent person, but in really an overly emotional, hysterical female, who really could not put aside her emotive nature for the sake of reason, argument, and I mean, for example, without going into too much detail and discussing the concept of love. And I've mentioned this before, that love is often used as a sort of substitute religion. People believe in the saving grace of love. Love can quote unquote save people and blah 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 blah. This is just a substitute deity basically. And I explained this to her, and of course this provoked tears and blah blah blah. And as Stardust is a quote unquote bitter old man, I've been through this before. I've been subjected to emotional manipulation. I think a lot of guys, younger guys, they don't know this, that the waterworks and whether they're crocodile tears or not, that's impossible. But the waterworks are often, in a general sense, are often, I even think in some cases, subconscious means of manipulating you. Whereas at a very young age, you might want to sort of rush to the female's aid and quote unquote comfort her and make sure that she is okay or whatever. As you get older, and you go through these experiences, you know that this is a tool that many women, perhaps all women, I don't know, but many women employ. And it's worked for ages. The poor woman crying, man comes to her aid, blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
But it is a kind of manipulation, whether they want to acknowledge it or not. And even if it isn't a kind of manipulation, I don't have the time or patience at my age for people who cannot have a rational discussion. I'm not asking for some sort of genius. I'm just asking for a reasonable discussion that doesn't involve unnecessary waterworks. And it's not that I have anything against tears. I think, feeling and emotion is a very important aspect of being a human being. But there are certain things I do think are that warrant provoking that sort of thing, and other things that don't. And I just don't deal with people like that, men or women, and particularly women, because women are much more inclined to do that sort of thing. I say, okay, you're going to do this. I don't need to talk to you anymore. Bye.
Yeah.
Totally cool with that. The person could be cool in every other aspect of his or her being, but I just don't. I don't deal with it. That's there. We talk about boundaries and rules. I mean, it sounds kind of strange, but yeah, those are boundaries and rules. I don't deal with emotional manipulation, and I don't deal with manipulative waterworks. That's just it. That's what Stardust says. I'm done. Don't deal with it. Bye.
Yeah.
And I think that's really effective, because every time you encounter it, you shut it down. Bye. That's all you need to say.
Yeah.
They don't need to think about it. You're not. I mean, the other thing is, I think what we as men, when we're certainly in younger phases or purple or blue pill phases, we're much more inclined to just be comforting towards women no matter what, to take their quote unquote plight really seriously, even if that plight is, frankly speaking, not really a plight. All right. So in this particular case, that I recognize it for what it was. I dropped it. That's it. Don't talk to the person anymore, and don't want to.
Yeah.
And I think that's you need to have these rules, and then when you are going your own way, you're much more aware of your own nature and women's nature, and it's easier to incorporate these things, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I've had a lot of experiences with a different woman recently. Going back into the sort of the mating pool, and these women laying it on really thick, asking me, "Are you a nice guy?" Yeah. I say, define nice. So, a gentleman. I said, well, that's a fairly broad definition. And they lay it out that, they say, well, I've been in past abusive relationships and men have abused me and walked all over me and all the rest of it. And, I lay it down for them that there was two people in this equation. You made choices. And as a result of those choices, things happened. You're party to it. The women don't like hearing that. So I understand where you're coming from with that, but there's a lot of times when you do lay it down for women that you're not a pushover, that you're not going to allow them to slip into that victim role. That you're not going to be a rescuer. You're not going to play that role.
That's it at the end of the day, man.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
Being a rescuer or a lifeguard or not, I mean, it's, I think it really comes down to the point. It's not that I'm completely oblivious to suffering, but there's a difference between someone actually splashing in the deep waters off the beach, legitimately drowning, and someone basically feigning and faking it. And more often than not, it's feigning and faking it, and I don't have the time or energy for that or the patience.
Exactly.
And if even if it's not just the waterworks, even something else. I think these are the kinds of tests that I've created for myself in dealing with women. So far I haven't had any what I would call romantic interaction per se, although there might be a particular woman I'm interested in, maybe. But you have these rules, and waterworks is one, and a willingness to accept things that are probably true. As you just pointed out, it takes two to tango. Both were involved, and that you're not going to just sort of instantly take her side. And I think that's almost a automated reaction once you're going your own way. You don't jump into the white knight role by saying, "Oh, I disagree with you." I don't sugarcoat things with anyone.
No.
Man or woman. And for me, if a woman wants shit sugar-coated, I just don't talk to her. It's fine if that's the way she wants it, but if she can deal with hard truth, whether about herself or other people and her interactions, whatever, then that's good. And that actually makes me attracted to her. But that is, as rare as the, black pearls or something. I don't know.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, you get that same sort of dynamic in a group. So if you're doing group therapy, if the content of that group, of the discussion, if it stays at an emotionally safe level, that group will not progress. So there won't be any progression forward. Nobody will benefit from that. That group will take on a collective identity of a victim. So there'll be no progression forward. So once you step into that role, you're signing yourself up to play that role over and over again, and at the slightest incidence of her, oh, hang on, sorry, man. What the fuck is that?
You're not referring to my avatar, are you, Spetsnaz? I know you love her.
I don't know how to answer that.
Big hot mama.
No, there was a ad that popped up.
Okay.
What was I saying? At the slightest drop of a hat, I mean, she's going to attribute anything that you do as an attack on her. So it stems back to projection. She sees that all the past relationships were a result of her being a victim, so she was acted upon. So it doesn't matter if you're going out of your way to try and please this woman. We've seen countless examples of this.
Yeah.
It leads to a point where a man does something very incidental, and she'll take it to heart, and she'll see that as an attack on her, and she'll respond either violently or by proxy through the courts. So you can't win in that situation.
Well, women have a tendency, I mean, all people do, men do too, but women to a much greater degree to sort of personalize their own experiences into sort of the general playing field. And so you get situations where you might be talking, stats or facts, and they'll just kind of flip out and lose it. I remember C.S. MGTOW telling me some story about him explaining the wage gap to the girlfriend of a friend of his, and the girlfriend just sort of burst into tears. And I mean, this is, of course, a really extreme example, but one thing I've noticed in conversations with women in sort of exploring the field again, and it's I would say very shallow exploration, since I'm not dating, or I'm just, I'm more willing to talk to women than I used to be. Not because I think they're different, but just because if you're going to have some renewed interest in women, you got to do it anyway, is basically to the extent of what they're going to say that they're not like that. And I hate to bring up the Nawal thing, but there's no such thing as Nawal. There's no unicorn. Every woman's going to be a woman. To say that, there's Nawal is to say that they're basically men. They're not women. So, but, if they start, I've had in conversations with women sometimes where they start talking about how they're not like that, or they've never done that, and they go out of their way to expressly state that. And it becomes pretty obvious to me that they're almost certainly like that.
Yeah.
And even if they're not, why the need for this sort of elaborate defense? And what you ideally should be looking for, I think, is a woman, and these are perhaps as rare as unicorns, or almost, who's a self-reflective person who actually thinks, yeah, maybe I've done that, or yeah, that's something to think about. And so you can, I think, take baby steps through conversation, seeing the way she reacts to things, how she processes things, and if she, at any point in time, acts impulsively or applies standard female behavioral tactics, whether it's the waterworks, other kinds of emotional manipulation, exceptionalism, as I just mentioned, the sort of female, I'm different, blah, 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 then those are, to my mind, red flags. And I just generally either politely end the conversation or just hope it trails off, and I don't talk to the person again. It's nothing personal, but it's just, I have rules that start us in interacting with women. Most women, I find, are not worth my time of day. I can't have a good conversation with them. They're totally unreflective. They're vapid. They're self-absorbed. And this has probably been your experience dating, which we'd love to hear about. But, so I just say, that's it. We don't need to talk. I also should point out that the few times I've actually broached the topic of sort of occupation, and one thing, particularly women in my age bracket, you mentioned, approximately how much money I make. It's great. Being poor, not making much money is a great filter too. And I think, I love it when Paul Proteus put it this way, what do you do? What do you do? They hear that and they just, oh, okay. So, that's another thing. But there's just a lot of filters you can apply. And, everyone has filters. Women have them too. They're mostly related to resources and what he can do for me. For me, it's just, can the person, particularly, can the female listen? Is she self-reflective? Is she mature in that regard as a human being? Or is she just totally self-absorbed and just beyond that stuff? Yeah.
Well, it's interesting what I've found, especially with women recently. Well, they've always been like this, to be quite honest. But it's getting to the point now where you're submerging yourself into a pool of just this moral abscess of just complete rampant narcissism. I've never seen anything like it, and it's being fueled by social media. But a lot of times you rock up and you meet this woman and you're an object. You're an object to be talked at. A lot of times I'll be sitting there and I've leaned over the table and said to a woman once, I said, do you ever draw breath? Between sentences, do you ever draw breath? Because I'm really scared for you and I have a lot of concern that you're going to hyperventilate. And she didn't like it. But it's gone to the point where you just become an object. That's it. They'll ask you a few requisite questions about what do you do. They won't ask what you do for fun. They won't ask anything about your family. They don't want to know you as a person. They just want to know whether you're adequate and tick those requisite boxes, and then they can move from there. But
you become a kind of human microphone. You're on the opposite end of the table, and they're sort of speaking into the microphone. That's you.
And it's absolutely draining. And you want to be anywhere else in the world. Yeah, I've got 100 other things I want to do, just like anybody else. You could go home, you could read a book, you could play a video game, you could go to the gym. There's a million.
Take a dump, probably better than that.
Take a dump. You get much more out of it. But you're looking at women today, it's selfie after selfie. It's just what they're putting on social media. They just see themselves as celebrities.
Well, this is true in general. I mean, the YouTube and the internet in general has turned ordinary folk into some kind of sort of celebrity. I don't really like the idea, but selfie culture, yeah. I mean, social media and the internet has really exacerbated the natural tendency we find in women to be fairly egotistical and self-centered. And I have this umbrella term, me syndrome. It's a me. They all suffer from that. Yeah. And yeah, when you have social media and they're at their peak, their fertility, early mid-20s and whatever, they just lap it up and they enjoy it and they enjoy projecting it, and even when they're older, it's still the case. So it's really just a symptom of the times. But I mean, this does go back to female nature. this me syndrome, which is universal. It's just gotten a lot worse because you have these we used to have social buffers, and they're not in place anymore.
Right.
Every person is a star. Every human is a star, and particularly every woman is a star. She can take a picture of herself in a short skirt and then put it on Facebook, and her female friends will comment on how the polka dots are pretty, and the guys will say, "Oh, you're so beautiful," and just insanity, basically.
Yeah.
And given that, it's very brave of you to sort of re-enter the dating scene, and I've never done that myself. I've never really formally gone on dates, maybe a few, but your experiences so far have been overall pretty negative, right?
Been feeling negative. I mean, I met a woman today, and it was exactly the same deal. She was talking at me. There really wasn't anything there. Very attractive woman, but besides that, it just didn't hold any interest for me. But the reason I want to speak about it is because I've seen a lot online in terms of comments and forums, etc. Whenever, and we'll talk about red pill men here, whenever they speak out about needing a connection or seeking a connection with a female, it's not that they get shamed. It's just that what they say gets shut down, and I don't think that's right.
I think, please. Yeah.
No, I mean, they have every right to say what they say, but at the same time, it's shutting down that dialogue. He's not going to speak out again. And I've seen a lot of comments online in videos and what have you, men making comments that, no, women are this, women are that, you shouldn't have anything to do with them. And then a lot of these same guys are sending me messages saying, I'm hurting. How do I interact with women safely? Give me some advice. So I get a lot of those messages. So I feel it's important to speak out. And we know what the risks are. We know all too well what the risks are for men in interaction with females. But that's a separate issue to that want, that desire for female companionship. And it's something that needs to be discussed, I feel.
No, I agree. I mean, I'm not immune to that myself. I certainly, in the last couple of years, I had no desire, and I suppose there's some desire coming back, but it is filtered by, like I said, essentially just a bunch of simple rules of kinds of behavior and verbal communication that I just don't tolerate. And it's like a switch. I can turn it on and off. Someone says something, I've had a couple of conversations with females, and I talk about, I've been saving for over a year for this super gaming rig, and it's going to be expensive, blah blah blah. And then if I hear something, and I have heard this on 2 or 3 occasions, how can you waste so much money on it? I just end the conversation. And then you're gonna fuck with my hobbies when possibly you're spending all this shit on handbags and shoes. First off, if you're not a gamer, this is another thing for me. If you're not a gamer, if you're a female and you're not a gamer, I'm probably not going to have any interest in you, because that's an important hobby to me. Depending on the game and the time of the year, I might be playing a lot. Yeah. I've had experiences in the past with high levels of intolerance towards my gaming, because of course it takes away from the attention that's supposed to be put on her. Not understanding that someone might have a hobby and wants to save up for something and invest in it, that's just another, once again, a red flag. So even though I certainly would like female companionship, what you need, this desire for female companionship absolutely needs to be tempered, in my opinion, by a set of rules that are sort of general. It could be generally applied to all men. So I think all men ideally should be wary of, say, the waterworks manipulation and sort of victimhood narrative, and should really develop a very robust intolerance to that sort of thing, without fear of loss. I mean, there's nothing to be lost in a woman in that. She's a waste of time anyway. And then on a personal level, whatever one's hobbies might be or personality quirks, and so you just realize, women are a certain way, and you might be desirous of companionship, but the principles that you espouse as a man going your own way, they can never be violated. So it could be the general rules, the specific rules, And of course, things like marriage and cohabitation, obviously, those are off the table.
Yeah.
And so, of course, you do end up kind of looking for almost pseudo-unicorn because so few women fit that description. But that's okay because you're doing your best to protect your interest in your person that way. At the same time, you're not completely shutting down your desire for female companionship because you're open to the idea, but you're approaching it very cautiously.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that with myself and you as well, I mean, we've experienced a lot of relationships with women over the years. You in your past, me sort of fairly recent past. But I know there's a lot of guys online that have messaged me. Now, they've never interacted with women in an intimate sense. And they see what we're putting out there. I guess they grasp it in a theoretical sense, what we're talking about. But at the same time, do you think that they would be better prepared, they'd have a better defense if they actually went out there and interacted with females? Now, I'm not advocating that at all. I don't advocate, just putting it out there, I don't advocate men to go out there and seek sex or seek relationships with women. I want men to be in the best position they can to defend themselves. If that means abstinence, then I'm in favor of that. I'm not here to judge men, but at the same time, I know that what I've experienced, I know what you've experienced, has put me in a position to know exactly what I don't want, and it gives me a fair indication of what I do want.
Yeah, there's no doubt that lived experiences inform you, even experiences as a blue pillar. I mean, when years ago one of my exes tried to chop off my sexual organ, I mean that I know I don't want that. Seems a pretty obvious thing, but that's not something I want. No. When I was almost run over in a parking garage, that by an angry female companion, I mean, I know I don't, but even I think that's the psychological stuff. But I agree with you. Men should do whatever they feel comfortable doing, but I think even without all those life experiences, the things I just talked about, those filters can still be applied. I mean, that is to say, you don't need to have gone through a shitstorm necessarily to apply those things. If you have a particular hobby and she, for example, and you're only 21 or 22, and she expresses some sort of disdain for it, then you can just shut her down and you don't talk to her.
I mean, just from my experience back when I was at that age, what I'm thinking about is how, and not deliberately manipulative that women can be, but they know how to utilize sex and know how to use it to their advantage. And I know that a lot of times I was just, at that age, if it's in front of me, I was going to take it. And they can manipulate me.
It's tough, yeah.
They can manipulate me to do anything. So my just concern is with a lot of younger guys because they don't have that experience
and physiologically they're different. We were just talking about how much harder it is. Sure. Working out and maintaining your weight and dropping fat. Now in my very late 30s versus even my mid or early 30s, and how I have to restructure my training. But one benefit is, I'm just not as horny as I used to be, and I'm far more interested in just companionship than I am pure sex. I mean, in fact, sex is kind of the last thing in my mind. Now, in the case of someone who's 22 or 21, probably not the same situation. And there's probably a lot of sort of intertwining, sort of mingling, conflation between, they probably want both in equal measure, maybe even sex even more. So that's a very different situation. And it's weird because I've been in that situation, but I've never been in that situation with red pill knowledge. Back when I was 21, 22, I was, just a bona fide blue pillar. I was sycophant. I was willing to countenance almost everything for a blowjob, And these guys are different because they're armed with this knowledge, the knowledge usually of men who've gone through these experiences, sure, and the observations we've made. And that's a new situation because that's not one I've been in or you've been in. You weren't 21 and with this knowledge in your head. So that's right. I don't really know, but once again, I think, there's the sexual interaction, which is kind of a separate issue, and I don't think you necessarily need to apply the filters I talked about to sexual interaction. If you just want to fuck, that's not that difficult. Now, of course, there are a lot of risks there, and I personally think, depending on the context, I've just remained abstinent for over 4 years. But it can be risky, you know. I mean, she could mysteriously get pregnant. If it's a fuck buddy, it could, you know, false rape back. There are all kinds of risks involved.
Yeah.
And that needs to be weighed in carefully as well. And so I think in a way, the young red pill man has a lot more challenges than just being a bona fide blue pillar who is just going to, you know, oh, I'll do this for you if you suck my dick kind of thing. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been a blessing for me. I mean, you've helped me to a great regard, so has Barbarossa, just in terms of, you know, ducking the bullet. But, yeah, especially with the young men, even myself, I mean, you have the same fear that if you have sex with a woman, you stick your penis in a woman, then you lose control of that situation. You can't defend yourself.
You do legally in terms of the environment. You have none. I mean, you basically, every time you stick your penis in a woman, at least in the Western environment and in Oceania, in your neck of the woods, you don't have any rights anymore. I mean, you know, the phrase, what do they always say? You know, keep it in your trousers or whatever.
Yeah.
That's the solution. I agree with them. That seems to be the only solution.
Yeah.
Because the idea in society is that if you consent to have sex with a woman, that means you're consenting to a number of things. You're consenting to becoming a father, apparently. You're consenting to not becoming a father, that is giving up on, you know, letting the woman abort the child. You're consenting to giving the kid up for adoption. You're consenting possibly to supposedly raping the woman. You're consenting to all kinds of things. The minute you engage in sort of sexual relations, in particular vaginal intercourse, you've opened up a new can of worms, and you've just consented to a whole bunch of things. You might not be aware of that if you're not aware of these issues, but you have, and the potential is always there that the woman can abuse that, and you have to be really, really, really careful about that. Now, like I said, I'm fortunate, wizened and old as I am, that I just don't really care that much about sex. I mean, at some point in time, maybe I'll have it again, and I guess it'll be okay, whatever. Yeah. But it's not my primary interest. When you're a lot younger, that's harder to ignore. So it's really kind of a different ball game. Yeah. But that is the reality. The minute you stick your penis in a vagina, whether you want to give your consent or not, it's like forced military conscription. You've given your consent to do all kinds of things.
Yeah, that's right. And it's hard for, it must be especially hard for a lot of younger guys as well. Because they're submerged in this content every day. And they're seeing the worst aspects of female nature, and they're seeing what is happening to men. They're seeing these horror stories. So you can imagine the fear they have from just everyday interaction, the suspicion, the cynicism. And a lot of that's warranted.
Well-founded as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely well-warranted. But at the same time, it must make it incredibly difficult to interact with females. I remember back when I was in my 20s, it was just completely carefree. You know,
I suffered a lot, but I certainly was ignorant at least, so that helped.
Yeah, and ignorance in itself was, thinking back, well, that made it a lot easier for me, because I know if I had the knowledge I have now, it would have made it incredibly difficult. Imagine being on a college campus right now with all that kind of bias and fear.
That's the thing. I went to uni first time in the mid-'90s, and I just, you had some freaks and some of these lesbian, extremists, but the kind of stuff I hear about, particularly in the country of my birth, the United States, or for neighboring countries, Canada, UK, Australia, it's just it's insane. I can't imagine that kind of environment. But yeah, so I don't. They're in a really, really rough spot. But I think you need to establish a bottom line for younger guys, and that's got to be survival takes precedence. So you need to rationally just calculate the risk. Once again, it's like forced military conscription. The minute you enter a vagina, you have given up all your fucking rights to further interaction with the woman potentially. Yeah. That needs to be accepted, and if that's not worth the risk, then you need to abstain from that. and find yourself some good porn and wank off or buy a fucking doll or what's that thing that recently is this fucking ass thing or I don't know. You know I forgot what it's called, but it's really expensive. You know, you need to find alternatives because that's not going to get you. That's not going to get you into trouble. It's
at the same time
men are being
go ahead.
Men are being physiologically and emotionally tormented. Younger guys, in particular, in this stage, because the risks are so enormous. The social media has inflated the female ego to titanic proportions, and it's just they're kind of damned if they do and damned if they don't. If they don't, they're sort of left with this nagging, gnawing feeling of missing out on one hand, but also the urges, those physiological hormonal urges you tend to have when you're a lot younger. Yeah. And if they do, well, become a daddy, don't become a daddy, none of it matters. You don't have a choice in the matter. So you're right. You supposedly raped her. I didn't know that when I was doing it, or whatever. These are just things that there's no way out, really. It's a horrible dilemma they're put in. And as much as I kind of long sometimes for the days of youth, so I could just not put myself through egregious dieting methods and could train more efficiently, I don't want to be at that stage now with the way the atmosphere is and the way things are. Yeah. But the preservation, that survival instinct's got to come first, I think, regardless of however difficult it is. You gotta have those rules. You gotta have the filter, and you gotta just realize that every time you consent to have sex with a woman, you've become a conscripted soldier and slave to the state. Basically, that's the end of it.
Yeah, it must be even harder for them because all those experiences of drinking, getting drunk, partying. Going out there and socializing and discovering sort of the social landscape for the first time. It's all a big adventure, and going over and interacting with females, going over, So imagine walking to those situations with having that feeling of caution, which again is well warranted. I'd have it if I knew what I knew now back then. But it does in some way limit their experiences. So it must be incredibly difficult to have that kind of apprehension, that caution.
Absolutely, but what choice is there? I mean, they really have little choice. They have to focus on survival and preservation. At the same time, there's nothing wrong with wanting to have or experience female companionship. The problem really is not in the desire to experience it. It's just in the consequences of following through with that desire. Sure. If you don't have your filter on, and I'd argue it's probably impossible to completely filter out stuff. I mean, I'd like to think I have a very good filter, but you never know. There's always some risk involved when dealing with women in the current climate. No matter how many filters they pass and how quote unquote cool they seem, there's always going to be some risk, and there are always going to be women. There are going to be things about women that are just going to remain female. That's why they're women. Yeah. And you have to be willing to accept that if you want to interact with them. So that's another thing. A lot of this is not about being interested in a unicorn or looking for a unicorn. It's about understanding women for what they are and trying to basically, I guess, to find every woman will be a woman, but the woman with the least amount of these bad qualities. Sure. They're still going to be present to some degree, but I think every woman in this current climate has this me syndrome to some degree. But you got to work on, I guess, finding one with a minimal amount of that or a lesser degree of that. But for the younger guys, it's really got to be tough. Yeah. And for some of them, it might be worth the risk in the sense that they just have to have the experience. For others, maybe not so much. But you're absolutely right, Spetsnaz, that we don't, at least in public forums, talk about the male need for companionship, or male mother need to some degree. I guess I don't know if they're interchangeable. Yeah, but I think you can actually overcome it to a degree, and I did for a while. And I think I still have. I don't feel an acute, when I think about women and a rekindled interest, I don't think about, rushing into the arms of a woman, blah, 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 blah. For me, it's this very slow, careful, deliberative process of elimination, of conversation after conversation, essentially seeing if she is fit. And I don't mean physically in that sense, but mentally, emotionally fit to interact with me. I mean, Barbarossa said something that I think really resonates with a lot of guys, and I would agree to a certain extent. I mean, you're the prize. Even if you're not an actual prize, even if, your monetary status doesn't grant you that, you're the prize in as much as you are the first line of defense in your own personal survival and self-preservation. So when I interact with a woman, I'm essentially just seeing, is she worthy of me? Because I have to value myself most, and every conversation is a process of elimination to see if that I have with a potential woman I might be interested in, see how is that going, and to what degree she's actually interested in me. And if she shows any of those attributes, she's just gone. I just don't talk to her.
Yeah.
So
that's quite. I'm at that point now. And getting to that point of being very selective and having that filter, like you say, is something quite foreign to me, because I never used to have that. I used to just run on instinct all the time.
Yeah, tattoos, go for it.
Tattoos, go for it. Ex-strippers, go for it. But it's interesting. I know that if I'm in a situation, say, it could be a social occasion, for instance, and I feel out of place because I'm around people that I don't feel I fit in with. They could be from a different background to me, and I feel, maybe I should be around inmates or tradesmen, and I feel more at home. But in those kind of situations, if I feel that I'm sort of out of my depth, or I feel socially uncomfortable, I start scanning my environment, looking for those types of females. And if they're not there, I used to go out and seek them. I'd actively go into town and find one. And just, I could lock eyes with a woman from across the room. I can still do it, and it's like a magnet. You
are a pretty studly guy, let's be fair.
Well, you've seen pictures of me, but I wouldn't say that. But, yeah, I mean, I can lock eyes with, that type of woman from across the room. And it's like, let's say, like milk into water. We understand the language. It's like we're talking shorthand.
Well, I think, Spetsnaz, you're touching upon an important part. I mean, men are intensely physical, usually, in their interest in women. And
sure.
we traditionally and just instinctively work on sort of physical cues. So, in your case, it's the tattoo thing, which just totally escapes you. And this is, you've seen pics of me. I have fucking tattoos all over my body, but I don't like women with tattoos. Mm-hmm. And I have... give me a killer pair of green eyes, and I just, well, that was it.
Sure.
Right. But I think, it sounds absurd. It sounds like a cliche, beauty is more than skin. I'm not even talking that beauty is more than skin deep, but I think what we as men, because we're so physically oriented, in our perception of women, that's what we look at first, usually, is getting past the physical cues. And actually, I try to, when I'm interacting with a woman, and most often, not always, it does take place online, because that's where I spend most of my time, whether it's the gaming world or whatever, I just focus on the conversation. I don't even, if there's a woman who is of interest to me, I can actually just say, because of the filter, you pass all these filter steps of the conversation over a long period of time, then you move from the next stage. And does she look good? Okay. Does she look okay? That's fine. I mean, I really have gotten to the point where I just don't even focus on physical stuff. I mean, admittedly, I don't actually like big hot mama. I mean, if someone looks the way my avatar looks, I don't think, that would be a deal breaker. But
sure.
You got to be reasonable. But these physical cues that I used to operate on, and admittedly, there was a time when I had quote unquote yellow fever. Not really. It was more sort of Korean fevers, because I'd spent a couple of years in South Korea. I had at least 2 Korean ex-girlfriends. I'd like the slim sort of Asian look, whatever. And it was just was stupid, because that tells you usually nothing about the person. Just like having a killer pair of green eyes, or, they're just things that I normally in my 20s or early 30s would have, these hang-ups, like you and your tattoos and me and as long, for example, if they're not Asian, they have to have light eyes because I don't like dark eyes or whatever and shit like that. So you got to move past stuff like that, I think, and really just focus on that filtering conversation. Sure. Because if you are interested in companionship primarily and maybe sex secondarily, I mean, you can actually kind of work on sex. I think it's a lot more difficult to work on personality defects. I think so. Sure. That for me, I'm trying to reverse engineer. I've been trying to reverse engineer my approach to women, trying to basically counteract this thing that instinctively, physically, does she look good? Does she look good? Does she look good? That tells me nothing, unfortunately, about her character. In fact, usually if they look really good, they tend to have horrible characters, sure, as you probably experience. Oh, yeah. So that's a difficult thing to do. But I think if you're going your own way, you're probably better equipped to do that. Barbarossa has pointed out in previous videos, older videos, when you're interacting with women, don't just focus on looks. Focus on intelligence, focus on emotional maturity and other things. And I've been trying, the extent that I interact with women, to apply that, because I do think that's more important. I mean, I'm not interested in some sort of a trophy girlfriend or someone I can fucking show off. It's totally irrelevant to me. I want to, if to the extent that I do want a girlfriend, that person's got to be someone I actually want to hang out with and game with, and that's, as long as she's of tolerable appearance to my standards, and there's still some standards, I don't really fucking make a big deal of that. I've kind of filtered out the cues. I don't need a hot Korean chick. If you have brown eyes, we'll look past that or whatever if you're European. And so I think these are almost fixed action patterns. You develop this taste, and then over the years, you've done it with your tattoos, and I did it with my weird fetishes, appearance fetishes, and you kind of convince yourself that's your type. That's what you like. And sometimes when you convince yourself of something like that, you can actually turn it into reality. Because you said, it's milk and water. They understand the language and stuff. But I think ultimately that's a figment of your imagination. You're taking a kind of imaginary taste you have because at some point in time it might have appealed to you. Sure. You turn it into this rule for yourself. And of course you've noticed over the years how it's gotten you into hot water, right? And you just, I think it's a time in your case and everyone's case to just, if you're interested in interacting with women, get rid of all those weird sort of physical quirk things. She's got to, be blonde. She's got to have green eyes. She's got to be Korean. She's got to have tattoos. She's got to have fucking nipple piercings or whatever, Yeah.
Hey, I know the type for you. You ever heard of sapiosexuals?
Well, I can understand what it means. I've never heard of the term. Officially of the term.
Yeah, no, girls attracted to intelligence. I think you'd find a good market there.
Well, I'm not really fishing. I'm
No, I'm saying it.
Well, look, my assessment of women women, I've said this in videos before, and I think it's an accurate statement. Women don't really like intelligence in and of itself. They like what you can do with intelligence. So if you're Bill Gates and you're a smart guy and you found a multi-billion dollar, yeah, that's great. Or, if you're inventing some product or you're an engineer doing some great work and you're making tons of money, that's great. Women in general are not interested in abstract thought. They're not really interested in, generally speaking, in intelligent conversation, despite the claims to the contrary. Yeah. So yeah, maybe, but I just have my filters. Even intelligent women I've encountered in recent times, if they put on, they're overly emotional or whatever, I just shut it down. So, yeah. For me as well, I don't think, there was another hang up I used to have. It was sort of, she had to be a sort of intellectual. And, over the years, I don't think I've met personally a single female intellectual. Yeah. And that's kind of withered away too. Why is that even important? Because what's so rare, and they do exist, some of them, but you really have to, that's I think was so key for me these past 4 years of spending time by myself. I spend, I'm kind of a recluse. I still am a recluse, but I did meet up with one of my subs for the first time yesterday, and he was a really cool guy. Talked a lot, had an interesting conversation. So if you ever listen to this, man, it was a nice dinner chat, and it was good meeting you. But yeah, it's just an interesting process that you spend all this time in isolation. You think about yourself, you think about your relationships to other people, to men and women, and you really get to know yourself. I mean, know thyself. That's kind of been paramount to me. And I know the kind of, if I were to ever have a relationship again, the kind of thing I'm receptive to and the kind of thing I'm not receptive to. Right. And I think you need to keep the filters up throughout. I mean, let's say I were to ever enter a relationship again, and I noticed, 1 or 2 violations of the rules, then, you got to have a serious conversation. And if it seems to proceed in the wrong direction, you just got to end it, because those are just the rules. You need to have those rules for the purposes of self-preservation. And the way I look at relationships, and when we were younger, of course, we looked at women as sort of the saving grace, and engaging women as an act of salvation. I remember when I was 24 and I met my borderline ex, super amazing green eyes, blonde hair, very attractive. I mean, I just fell head over heels for her. And, my boring life suddenly became fulfilling, and it had meaning and all this shit. These days, the way I look at a relationship is kind of like a piece of cheesecake in a way. If you like cheesecake or cake or ice cream, I mean, it's nice. But even if you do enjoy it, it's a double-edged sword, the calories and all that. So it's just a benefit. It's a benefit, more than, it's just like a nice bonus thing. It's kind of, potentially it's a nice sort of enhancement, just like if you've been dieting for a long time, which in some sense, romantically I have been, and yeah, it's nice to have a tub of ice cream. That's a bit too much, or maybe a piece of cheesecake or 2 pieces of pie or whatever. But I don't look at it as I did when I was 24, when I fell in love with my then ex, so green-eyed and blonde, and oh my God, she's so amazing, and I don't even have that capacity anymore. I can't fall in love. Yeah. I've become far too rational and too methodical in how I approach things. For me, I'm engaging with a conversation with her and myself and just saying, okay, cool so far, cool so far, cool so far, cool so far. And that's just how I roll. And if it works out at some point in time with a female, then I'll say, yeah, this is some pretty cool ice cream, I guess. But I'm still going to be on a diet most of the time. What does that mean? Metaphorically, it means, I'm going to be spacing out my calories. I'm not going to be spending excessive amounts of time with her. I'm going to have my space to myself, because we're not going to cohabitate at any point in time. We're not getting married. So it's kind of, I think you can look at relationships, and since we both train, and we're kind of like cheat days in a way. It's a bonus. You don't want to exploit it too often, because then you're going to throw off your diet, which is, the MGTOW lifestyle and self-preservation and male sovereignty. Yeah. But every now and then, a cheat day is good. It can boost your metabolism, makes you feel good. It fucking tastes good. I think that's a good analogy. You gotta know how to balance that out. How often can you engage in cheat? You need time to get to know these things, right? Yeah. So in your case, in everyone else's case, in my case, if you don't take the time with yourself to think about the things and the mistakes that you personally, we all made mistakes too. I mean, there's a notion that, it's all fucking on women. I fucked up too. I routinely ignored advice when I was my borderline bitch back then for a little over 2 years. Sure. Everyone saw it, what the fuck are you doing? She's crazy. No, I can save her. I can help her. You're acting like a lunatic yourself, and you just ignore people's advice and you keep on doing it. You gotta go through that filter for yourself as well. Filter out your own negatives. Filter out these weird physical hang-ups you have, be it tats or green eyes or whatever. Yeah. And then maybe you can get to some point, maybe, and maybe not even then. I don't know. I'm hardly an expert, but this is what's been working for me so far.
But it's really interesting you saying all this, because it's a far more healthy perspective on relationships than blue pillers have. So when people look at called MGTOW misogynistic or what have you. Well, no, we're coming at it from the perspective of seeing women as human beings. We're not projecting fantasies onto them. We're not building them up into these, these fantasies, these princesses. We're actually...
No, man, they're just cheesecake. And cheesecake can be dangerous if you fuck your diet up too much.
Sure, but you know what I mean. It's you're coming to the table. You want equal participation from this woman, and you're putting her through the steps. You want to understand that she's going to value you as a person, that she's going to value the experience that you have together, that she's going to not cross the lines that you've set in stone, because she's got to respect you as a person. So it's a very healthy approach. It's a shame that a lot of people don't see that. I mean, that's what we're striving for.
Well, it might be an approach doomed to failure. I mean, who knows? I mean, as I said, self-preservation and personal male sovereignty, those are the most important things. But it doesn't mean I'm give or take, whether it's men or women, they give to me, I give back. If I notice that there's little effort coming from the person, whether it's a man or woman, I'm going to give that in return. So my approach with women is also to kind of let them come to me, and the more they come to me, the more effort I'm willing to put in. But maybe it's all doomed to fail. I mean, maybe even with the filters and everything, even what I think is a reasonable approach is kind of looking for a unicorn. I mean, who knows? And it's not even that I'm looking. I'm just kind of open to the landscape in a way I wasn't before. So just in case I see some kind of, I guess you'd call an abnormality in the terrain, and I can pick up on it. But yeah, that is, Spetsnaz, you're really raising an excellent point about looking at women as human beings, or cheesecake or ice cream or whatever. They're not, everyone loves ice cream, but fuck, you eat too much of it and you can turn into a blimp, and it's not particularly good for you.
Sure.
Whereas I think once again, it's like, I used to look at women as, I don't know, like the super nutrient, with no calories, and you can't look at them that way ever again once you've taken the red pill and once you've gone your own way. But in the other extreme end, which is it's sometimes understandable, is in some cases we've talked about this, and I guess we've both gotten blowback for it. The kind of hatred, essentially it's hatred towards women, which to some level is understandable, but I find it just difficult to hate people for just being human beings. It doesn't mean I have to interact with them. I don't talk to most women, but I think ideally we should strive for that balance and just say, look, women are human beings, and they can definitely enhance your life, maybe, if they pass all the filters.
Yeah.
But, and maybe, and I think everyone goes through different stages. In my case, now I spent over 4 years of being completely disinterested in women. I didn't even really talk to them at all. I had no interest really in talking to them.
Sure.
And maybe some guy will go for 10 years like that. It's okay. I think every guy's got to go at his own pace. Maybe he never wants to deal with women again. That's all. Maybe he's a serial dater. Well, I guess that's cool too, but you still need to. And I think people have different goals. I mean, if you just want to have sex, I think that a lot of the things I'm talking about are irrelevant, but I'm not interested really in having sex too much. So my thing is much more for the companionship aspect.
Sure. It's an interesting point you raised there as well. Hatred of women. It's, a lot of that is externalizing blame, but it's coming to the point that understanding of women. That's where we need to come to. And you've raised this a number of times in your videos, and you've gotten a lot of flack over it. But it's understanding female nature. We should be questioning that. And it's every time that is raised, whether I raise it in a video, whether you do, whether Barbarossa does, we just cop enormous amounts of flack for it. People don't want to go there. They're very resistant. And whether it's because people just want to, it's very easy to generalize, because that's keeping things at a very emotionally safe level. Or people are just, they're white knight, they go into that mode. It taps into something very, very primal. But all we're asking for is just an understanding. Male psychology has been studied at length. But it's very rare to find studies on female psychology. So we just want a more in-depth understanding. We want to know what we're getting into. So, I'd argue a finer point.
female psychology has been studied a lot superficially. Nobody wants to speak the truth about it, but you know, self-help magazines probably exist there too. I mean, you go to the supermarket, the latest hairstyles for August 9th at 9:50 in the morning or whatever, that kind of shit. But and you know how to make yourself feel good after blah 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 break. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of pop psychology, but the actual psychology. I mean, a lot of the problem I think comes when we can't talk about women as human beings because women are that means subjecting women to criticism and means that they're flawed, and they are, just like we are. We're all flawed in some way. It has to be in the context of just women essentially as perfect beings. And the man has the default position of being flawed. He spends his entire life in our society and culture trying to disprove the assertion that he is flawed by, you know, doing good deeds and producing and making money and showing that he's not a quote unquote bad guy. Whereas women, it's the opposite. You know, it's they don't need to disprove anything. And so what we do is just kind of turn it all on its head and say, look, we both have our issues. We're men, we're women, we're very different. We're all just human beings. And so the way I approach women, once again, is that, look, I'm totally cool with you being a woman and a human being, but in you being a human being, it means you have faults, you have flaws, and I'm not just talking about your fucking cellulite, which is part of that, but it's you have these issues, and you want me to ignore them is asking me to pretend that you're not a human being because you want to fucking be pedestalized. I'm just not willing to do that. Yeah. And the opposite of that, I think, is, you know, you go from this ultra pedestalization, saving grace position to just, I fucking hate women. They're just fucking evil, which doesn't tell you anything, and doesn't really tell you how to interact with them. And a lot of these guys, I suspect, still want some level of interaction. Maybe some of them don't. I mean, like I said, I went for 4 years, over 4 years, not wanting any interaction with women. I just wanted to contemplate and read and study and make videos. And that's still very true to some degree, but I'm just more willing. And just saying something is evil just gives you the ability to completely dismiss it, rather than sort of withdrawing to yourself and sort of constructively reflecting on these things. But we don't live in a society where we can just say, look, women are human. That means they have flaws as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I know a lot of messages I get from guys, and I guess they could fall into the camp of sort of making those generalizations about women. But from what they've related to me, if a woman did show interest, that they have a very real fear that they crumble, that, you know, it would be like glass shattering, that if a woman actually showed them some form of tenderness, that they wouldn't have any defenses, that they'd drop everything. And that's, you know, it's a valid concern, that they know intellectually that they have to have these steps in place to safeguard themselves. But at the same time, they've been traumatized, you know, and it's trauma after trauma. So it gets to the point where it's almost unbearable. So I can understand the position they're in. They're feeling incredibly fragile. So I can understand why they want to keep things at that level, because it's so much safer and it's a way of protecting themselves. That's a protective buffer.
I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, I admit I have a tendency to just intellectualize everything, and maybe that's my own defense mechanism. I don't know, but by this point in time, you know, I am somewhat robotified. I don't really approach interest in women from an emotional level at all. It's just, like I said, I have my filter and my categories, and
sure.
And maybe eventually down the line there's some emotional thing. But I always think, I'm pretty much convinced, and maybe I'm wrong, that, you know, from henceforth, or just from really where I've been the last couple of years, that my emotions are always going to be filtered by my intellect, and sure. That's going to take precedence. Whatever feelings I might or might not have for a woman in the future, they're never going to be able to supplant my actual thoughts, my rational thoughts about her. Yeah. And I'm not saying that's even desirable for most men. I know that's what works for me. I think it can be useful. But I agree with you that, yeah, if you just work off of raw emotion, just saying, you know, women are evil, that does protect you. Why would you want to deal with something that's just evil? Especially if you don't have those filters and a kind of rigorous system that you've developed for yourself.
Yeah.
And interacting with women.
I can look at someone like yourself, and you're such a rarity, and that you can intellectualize things to that degree, and that can.
Took me a long ass time, brother.
I bet.
Long ass time.
But I mean, back when you were younger, I mean, what's the difference? In a very brief way, what's the difference between Stardust when he was 20 compared to now?
Jesus fucking Christ, man! That guy was a completely different person.
Yeah.
Had a better metabolism. Didn't have to punish himself. Didn't have knee problems with squats. No, I didn't even lift back then. Actually, I started lifting in my mid-20s.
Yeah.
Well, I was hyper emotional in my 20s, all the way up through my mid-20s. Hyper emotional. The kind of guy who would write love poetry and just sort of effuse emotion and I thought women liked that, you know, because they wanted someone who was emotional and in touch with them. I was a fucking idiot. I mean, I was in a sense. I was so ignorant. And I've said this before in videos. I think when you spend a lot of your teenage years in your 20s as essentially, to some degree, a hyper-emotional wreck, well, not entirely. It was always tempered to some degree. You just end up going the opposite direction. And so increasingly, I've become sort of undergone sort of robotification, which has been really useful. But now I'm finding that although I think a majority of myself still needs to stay in that robotified state, there needs to be more human interaction. And that's why, you know, we've been developing a friendship privately, and I've just been touching base with a lot of people and just being more open. And that's not just with women. I'm talking more to men now. Yeah. I'm getting in touch with people like Nico and CS and you. And, you know, a couple of years ago, I wouldn't have met up with one of my subs, and the guy just said, you know, here's my situation, and he happened to be in my area. Why not? And it was cool. So it's just about general kind of allowing the human aspect in, but the human aspect is always going to be subordinate to the other aspect. And in my 20s, it was the other way around. I had a rational aspect, and I had to. I studied at uni for a long time, and I had to do some fairly difficult things sometimes. But at the same time, when my interaction came to people, be it men or women, was all fucking emotional. With women, it was, you know, kind of a mixture of sexual desire and companionship. And with men, there was no sexual thing, but it was I would idolize them. If they were like, cool to me and help me out as friends, I would say, oh, they're the most amazing person in the world, and they're so cool, and they're my big brother. And I was kind of like a babbling idiot in some ways. I let my life be run by emotions, and it ran my life into the ground. And I think everyone can benefit from some kind of composition of interacting with your, you know, using your intellect to interact with your emotions and the back and forth. For me, what works is just taken so long, and I think it was such a long process because 21, you know, through my mid-20s, I was just unhinged. I mean, I was emotionally fucking unhinged. I didn't care, you know, you've seen some of my tats, that big one on my back, the Phoenix, that was after my breakup with the borderline chick, and I was so emotionally charged. Nobody really usually does this. I sat there with my, you know, back straight for 9.5 hours as the tattoo artist just needled away at that shit. And initially it didn't hurt, but after 4 or 5 hours it started to. 8 hours, 9 hours in, I was that close to passing out from the pain. I didn't fucking care. I was just concentrating on the emotion. Everyone's like saying, stop, you can come back tomorrow or 2 days later. You know, nobody gets these big ass tattoos all at once. No, I'm going to fucking do it. I'm going to fucking do it. You know, I was so angry and emotionally charged. And I just, I can't identify with that person anymore. And I'm thankful. Yeah. I'm thankful that person is dead, because that person, you know, that person has brought so little benefit to my life, that aspect of Stardust. He was a guy that didn't really understand the world, didn't want to, and relied too much on just instinct. And for me, that was being an innately emotional and expressive person. And I realized to evolve as an individual, I had to move away, shift from that paradigm to the opposite. And now I'm tempering that extreme stance of just sort of pure robotic intellect with a more humane aspect, if you will, or just sort of more human aspect, but it's still in place, and I don't want to lose track of that. And I don't think I can. It's like you train yourself for such a long time, and taking a step back from interacting with people and talking to people and just spending time on my own has allowed me to do that. And I think I'm in a better place now. I'm much more calm. I think I can regulate my feelings without getting overwhelmed by them. I mean, the only thing that pisses me off is my fucking internet horror story that I'm undergoing right now. But that's because, I've had to turn down jobs that I've been given and stuff. But apart from that, I'm calm most of the time. Yeah. So what about you? Do you see a difference between, you're a bit younger, or somewhat younger than between your current age and your early 20s?
Oh, absolutely. Back then you talk about emotional, I was firing on all cylinders. I was like just a kernel of rage, essentially. So I was striking out at everything around me. And with me, I was waiting for signs, and where I could instigate, conflict drama, but if they weren't there, I'd instigate it myself. And you talk about self-sabotaging, I sabotage everything around me. When it came to relationships with women, I'd always have at least, 4 or 5 on the go. And that's simply because if one dumped me, then I'd have the other ones to fall back on. They were my crutch. So I needed that kind of validation. So, yeah, that was me just striking out, just causing conflict, just self-harming.
At what point did you find, what was your real, that wake-up call where you realized something was wrong and or you had to change? What was the critical point in your life?
I was nearly dying. I was coming out of that coma. Doctors gave me a very minimal. I think they gave me about a 5% chance of survival, and that's what they relayed to my parents. So coming out of that, it was almost a literal death. So it's interesting how you say that person in the past is dead, because you've got to come to that point. We've got to say goodbye to the past and move on. But for me, coming out of that, I found focus for the first time in my life. I never had that before. And you talk about, strapping yourself down and getting that tattoo. Well, that was my moment where I could actually focus for the first time in my life. It wasn't energy being diverted in other directions, directions that were going to hurt me. So, yeah, but even coming out of that, there was a period of time after that where I just went back into the same cycle. Because it was familiar to me, but it was a gradual process. Like I'd come across content, but that was a point where I was almost at a moment of an epiphany where I wanted to change. But coming across your content, Barbarossa's, listening to that content, I rejected it outright at the beginning. I didn't want to hear it. It cut too close to home. So, it was a gradual progression for me. And I'm still coming to a point where, I'm leaving that baggage behind, because I still feel with women that there's this pull, there's this need for companionship. There's this, well, it's not a need, I convince myself that it's a need. But it's a definite desire that's there. And I know that I'm looking for something that doesn't exist, and I know a lot of that's projection. But still, it's falling back on, I don't know, a past illusion that,
like the tattooed woman that actually isn't like all the tattooed women you dealt with, or something like that?
I'm actually trying to date different women now. But it's strange sitting across from them, because it's hard. I'm saying I have nothing in common with you. I don't understand you. You're telling me that you've done this X, Y, Z, and it doesn't. It's from a completely different background. So you can imagine someone coming out of jail and then trying to reintegrate back into the upper echelons of society. It's like a bull in a china shop. So it's like starting from scratch again for me. So it's difficult.
Yeah, but what about the way women react to your physical prowess? That's certainly, you get positive interaction on that level.
Yeah, sure. I built my body up, and that was due to coming out of that coma. And I went into that coma because of a viral infection of the heart, so it was like an unseen enemy, and nobody could trace it. Nobody knew how it happened. So me building my body up, that was me basically preparing myself for another attack. So that's how protecting myself. So I got to that stage. So now it's at the point where I do get a lot of attention from females as a result of that. So when I'm interacting with females, it's the first thing they see and it's the first thing they react to, and it's positive. At the same time, there's still a great many hoops that I have to jump through in interaction with females. Like I say, you're sitting there, you're a sponge. They're talking at you. They have these expectations of you in terms of you've still got to tick these boxes in terms of income, in terms of what you do for an occupation, in terms of what your social circle is like, other superficial things, or what I deem superficial. So,
I mean, so have you not yet really developed a particular filter? I mean, for me, if I'm interacting with a woman, and like I said, I don't go out on dates, but if that conversation comes up about my income or something, I just tell them. And,
I don't hold back. When I talk to women, I'm very, very hardline. I'll sit down there. I'll give her a life coaching session. I'll break it down for her. I don't want to walk away from that interaction without her being pulled up on her shit. So women do not take kindly to that. But it's a very interesting reaction, and I love it because it's like a deer in the headlights. And I've said to a woman recently, I said, no man, and I'm betting this, no man has ever talked to you like this before, has he? She just sit there just nodding her head. No man's talked to me like that before. She didn't say it out loud, but she was nodding in terms of body language. I said, isn't that amazing? I said that you can sit here and play the victim and nobody will call you out on it. So while I am, how does it feel? And they don't know how to process it because they've never been spoken to in that fashion before. It's astonishing to me.
Yeah, but I mean, you're looking for companionship or long-term or something like that. I mean, but the sexual aspect, because you're an exceptional physical specimen. I mean, you probably, even with these women that you're sort of turning off with your verbal cues, you probably still could fuck them if you wanted to.
Oh yeah, I mean they come back to me. They take some time to process what I've said, but I really hate what you said, but I sure still want to suck your dick. Yeah, but I mean, I'm in the same boat as you, man. I don't want what I had before. I want something more, and I don't know what that. Well, I have a fair idea of what that more is, but it's. Again, I know exactly what I'm pretty sure I know exactly what I want. I mean, that's one things I've taken time to think about. Yeah, and that's and I envy that. Because you've gotten to a position where you can rationalize it and break it down to exactly what you want. It doesn't mean that it's possible to be realized. That's the thing. I mean, knowing what you want, I don't think what I want is actually removed from reality. I just think it's very difficult to obtain. Because most women, I mean, realistically speaking, right? Most women, they want to get married, they want to have children, all this stuff. I just want someone to hang out with, play games with. I mean, the sex isn't terribly important. Maybe, I guess, have sex, but just hang out with, talk with, spend occasionally time with, not too much time because then you get overload. And most women are, clingy. They're so, an introverted woman is interesting to me, if that's possible, because then we both need space. But who knows? I don't know if that's achievable. But I know that's what I want at least, so that is, I can proceed along those lines, whether it exists or not, or whether it's hard to find, or who knows. It's not, like I said, it's just cheesecake, man. It's just something that's nice. Yeah. But otherwise, I'm on my, consistent. I've been on my MGTOW diet for well over 4 years now, and I've been consistent about it on like my normal diets. Yeah. And, man, if I only had the same iron discipline, I'd be like sub 10%. I would have been sub 10% years ago. But no, it's, I think that's the key. It's just that realizing that it's just kind of a nice bonus, and it can definitely probably add to your life. You're going to feel better. But it's not going to transform your life. And at the end of the day, you're still going to be there with you. Sure. And you and I both lived all over the world and traveled a lot. And, you take yourself everywhere you go. There's no escape. Yeah. And that's one thing I've learned over the years.
wherever I was in Asia or Europe or the States, interacting with women and people, I was a decisive factor in being okay with yourself. And I was really restless in my 20s as well. Being okay with yourself, that's really important, because that's going to give you the kind of equanimity just to say, well, okay, she is cool, I like her, but she's not into me. Well, whatever. I mean, it's nothing's going to change in your life. It's going to stay the same.
Yeah.
Or she is cool, she's into you. It's nice. Things are kind of cool. This is a nice new thing, and it's a nice addition. But you can't. It's just, it can't be viewed as it's a human, as you pointed out. It's a human thing. Women are just human beings. Yeah. I think they can add to your life potentially, but they can also really detract from it, and that's why you have those filters in place. And
sure.
I think every MGTOW man needs his own general filters that are universal and personal filters, whatever they might be. And of course, like I said, this is not for, I haven't had sex in over 4 years. If people want fucking advice, I'm the last person to ask. But as far as just having a reasonable approach to interacting with women for something more along companionship lines, I've developed a system for myself that the filters worked well, at least so far. We'll see in the future.
Yeah. No, that's right.
Anything else you'd like to?
Yeah, I mean, there's something that I came across recently. A few different articles stating that, I guess, because we live in a society where sex is increasingly scarce for a lot of men, and that's due to they don't have the right social circle, or don't have the right financial situation, whatever, a number of different things. But it's that when sex is scarce, that men are more, I guess, open to commitment or seek commitment. And this can be seen in different communities where, I guess, there's more males to females. And there's certainly other communities. I know when I've been overseas, and when the men actually outnumber the women don't give a shit. They just kick back. Their appearance just goes right down the toilet, essentially. They don't put in any effort. You're sitting across the table from one, and she's just yawning. She knows that she's got the golden vagina. But what's your sort of take on that? Have you found that to be of truth?
Well, it's probably true, but as I said, I don't put a particular premium on sex, and I've gone over 4 years without it. And when I tell this to blue pill people, men or women, they kind of freak out. How is that possible? You don't die, at least not from that. There's probably some truth to that. I don't feel that that's my motivation and my own desire for female companionship, though.
No, but just in terms of general sort of general perceptions of what you've seen. Is it?
Well, I think so. I think there's a problem that men, because men are so physically oriented, they tend to conflate companionship with sex. It's almost like the same thing to most men, is my impression oftentimes, which isn't for me.
They have to have sex in order to feel intimacy. I know that's something that
I don't feel that at all.
Yeah,
I don't feel that at all. I mean, I can even be intimate with a few male friends of mine without, and obviously there's no sexual thing going on there, so I don't need that. Maybe I'm a weird freak or a weirdo, but I think that's a starting point for a lot of men, because there's just no real difference between the two.
Yeah.
For a lot of men, is my impression. So
well, it's interesting over the last few years that I've found that I've gotten a lot more from interactions with men, just in terms of substance. In terms of
that's always been the case.
Yeah, no, well, I didn't grow up with that, because, if my interactions with men were just either violent or aggressive, or, so they were direct challenges to me, and vice versa, so I went down that route. But, coming to this realization that male camaraderie, this brotherhood, this, I suppose you could call it companionship.
Yeah, exactly. We men traditionally are really aggressive toward each other. I'm going to make a video about this, but the other day, I was on the other side of the street. I was taking my walk and coming back home, and it's over nonsense. I don't even know what. There was a fight broke out between two guys. One guy was obviously a superior physical specimen, probably early 30s, very tall, probably juiced to the gills, big guy, pounding the shit out of another guy, and like 3 or 4 guys come in and hold him down. It was a mess. There's a lot of savagery that men express towards each other. Not just that, though. I mean, yeah, I think one thing that MGTOW has allowed me to do is form basically much closer bonds with certain men, at least, red pill-minded men, than I had been in sort of previous male blue pill relationships or friendships or however you want to term it. Yeah. So in a way, a lot of the things that I used to think I could only get from women, I get them to a large extent, not completely, from men. That said, and I've had this discussion with Nico a couple of times, there's something about female touch, and I'm not talking about the sexual thing, that obviously it's biological, it's just different. And that's something that I think is sort of universally desirable to men. But as far as sort of just emotional and mental connection, yeah, it's much better results from that from men. And those are things that I used to only attribute to being possible with women. I could only get X, Y, Z from women. Never would talk about those. Men tend to talk about shop a lot. Not just shop talk work, but just the things that they're doing. Oh, what are you doing? I'm working on my carpentry.
Exchange of knowledge.
Yeah, and that's. I mean, I'm all about that too. But it's rare that we kind of sit around and talk about our feelings, and we don't emote the same way that women do as well. I mean, in my interactions, I'm actually trying to. Women, for some reason, or for their good reasons for it, but we would go beyond the lengths of this discussion. They just want to talk about their feelings. They're not trying to find a point of origin and trying to trace it back. When I talk about my feelings, if I'm feeling something with someone, I want to understand where it's coming from, and I want to be able to regulate that feeling, whether it's good or bad. I don't want to just have a nebulous talk about, let's just talk about our feelings. I want to specify it, and I think if you can get into a kind of friendship or a relationship with a male that allows you to do that, it tends to be emotionally much more productive than interacting with women, because women are not interested in that point of origin. They're not really interested in understanding the causes. They just want to emote. Yeah. And one thing that men bring to the table in emotional interaction, I find, is because they're interested in cause and effect, they want to identify what's going on. So they can if it's a problem, they can fix it, or if it's not a problem, at least you understand the mechanisms of what's going on, and that's something you really can't get from women. Oftentimes, they speculate a lot. They don't really care. It's just about emoting. That as long as you can emote, that's great. Yeah. And for me, emotional expression is a controlled experiment that it's useful. As the High Lord biochemist, who doesn't appear that often, hopefully we'll get him on soon again, put it once. Emotions are a useful servant, but a terrible master. And I think that's kind of the difference between interacting with women and men, or the way women interact with each other too. That is, if men interact emotionally at all, and that's not very common. But as you pointed out, it can be very rewarding, and I find it just more beneficial because I gain more from it. In a sense that I used to just only attribute to women when it wasn't even the case at all with women. So.
I mean, it's opened up so many doors for me, just in terms of, different business opportunities, in terms of, different relationships, relationship opportunities, social opportunities, everything right down the line. So, establishing those networks with men has been vital. So, I mean, we have a lot of guys online, and, I suppose I've been in that boat because I haven't really made contact with that many people. I've made contact.
Well, I still think caution is a byword. I don't just reach out to people randomly. I mean, if I recall, you contacted me, and but yeah, I'm still cautious. I'm just, I try to put my feeler filters on and to see. I mean, they're clearly men that I just would not want to interact with because we're just so radically different. Yeah. But you never know. But yeah, I mean, this has really allowed you, as you put it, to sort of expand your possibilities on myriad levels.
Yeah, and I've been very cautious as well. I mean, I didn't talk to, I think, Barbarossa until got about a year and a half into my channel. I haven't talked to you. It's almost been 2 years since I've had my channel. So, I've been cautious in that regard as well. But I knew your body of work, so it speaks for itself. But I just know there's a lot of guys out there, and I talk about a network of support, but I don't know if they take it on board. Just how vital and important that is now, especially for men, and especially with the knowledge that they have now.
Well, in some sense, we're always alone. It's just the way you are as a guy. Yeah. And that's another reason that having some kind of network can be really helpful, if only to talk things out and talk things through. I think I did listen to your conversation with Mr. Becker, and he talked about that as well. Yeah.
And I have tremendous respect for Greg. It was interesting. That was the first time we ever spoke. And he had tremendous insights. But it's my concern is because there's a lot of guys that are just being bombarded with the information that they see. Because we're all being repeat marketed too. So our world is becoming smaller. When we look online, we're getting fed our subscription feeds, and we're getting fed the content that marketers want to promote to us, and a lot of it's along the same lines. So they're constantly being bombarded with, I wouldn't say negative messages, but they're seeing what men are being subjected to, or boys are being subjected to. So in itself, it's putting them in a position where they're going to feel very fragile. And I wouldn't say that they feel traumatized by what they're seeing, but I think under the circumstances, it's vital that they start reaching out to other men.
Yeah. I agree. But I'm, people call me arrogant, elitist, all kinds of names. I'm a very picky person when it comes to men and women, so I can't just sort of willy-nilly, I don't have it in me. Yeah. There are other people that are a lot better than that. I think, for example, Nico is a lot better at just sort of talking to everyone. I'm just not willing to do that. That's not in my nature. Mm-hmm. But I do, I've done this. I had a couple of weeks ago, I talked to a guy from my hometown. I was a bit sympathetic because he's from my hometown, from the Bronx. And I just listened to a story. I don't know if it was helpful, but I tried to help him out. So yeah, it is important. At the same time, caution is often warranted because there are a lot of unstable people out there.
Well, yeah, and especially. And, well, I wouldn't say especially, but online as well, because I think the greatest threat to us is going to come from probably inside our own circles. But, you've experienced that. So is Barbarossa in terms of being doxxed.
Yeah, in all my bald glory.
A lot of people said you look like Billy Zane, sort of UFC version.
I've heard that often, sort of, I guess. Yeah. And actually I've heard that a couple of times. Yeah. Look like Billy Zane, sound like Robert Downey Jr. What a combo. And all that is done for me. Absolutely nothing.
You mentioned that you do sound like him.
Yeah, well, I hear that all the time, but hasn't done much for me. Yeah. No, absolutely. I think it's, you got to be...
you got to exercise caution.
Yeah. That said, I do agree with you that networks are important, but once again,
I'll say something. It's taken me a long time to get to the point where I can sort of converse openly with people, whether it be a social situation or work situation. I had to really work at that, and it was a case of because I came from a place where I couldn't talk to the average person on the street. I didn't speak their language, so it was a case of just throwing shit at the wall and seeing what stuck. And I remember going into situations, and I still do it now. I still gauge people's reactions. I'm shaking someone's hand, I'm looking into their eyes, and wondering, do they accept me in the social circle? Do you accept me coming? And it isn't me seeking their validation. It's I came from a different background, so I'm just gauging whether they sense that I come from different, that they can pick up on that. You know what I mean? So I've had to train myself to get to the point where I can interact with people and, work within business environments and social situations.
Yeah, well, you have to be a lot more social than I do, in terms of work and.
Yeah, a lot of that is a burden as well. It's people that have
agreed.
People that I've known in the past, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't. I tend to socially interact where it's sort of appropriate, where I want to, not so much when a lot less so when I have to, although it does occur. But yeah, I mean, I definitely see your point there. It's a tough game to run. On one hand, being open to kind of the relationships with men, in interpersonal relationships with men, at the same time exercising caution, especially if they're blue pillars. I mean, I generally, I have blue pill friends, and I maintain them at arm's length. Sure. I'm still friends with them, but I don't, I don't talk about certain things with them.
And that's the best way. You keep them at a distance, and so they can't get too familiar with you, so they can't exert peer pressure on you and all the rest of it.
Yeah. And the red pill thing. I want to. I mean, as we're sort of drawing towards the end, I want to actually. I forgot one major point that's really important. I think men should. I mean, it sounds like a crazy point, but as far as women, the filter is concerned, they need to be familiar with the red pill and with MGTOW. That's important to me.
Right.
If they don't know that, or at the very least, even if they've never heard of it, be sort of familiar with concepts and how it makes sense to them. Mm. If they're not familiar with that, or even mildly interested in that aspect of things, and that's another sort of just goodbye. Yeah. Which is going to be, that's hard, but still.
Do you know what that cuts the mating pool down to in terms of percentage?
It doesn't matter, man. But that's the whole point. It's about self-preservation. So yeah, of course, it cuts down I'm looking at mate, but the mating pool or the dating pool or the companion, whatever you want to call it, the woman pool, down to a tiny percentage. But I mean, I'm Stardust and Stardust is me. So that's an important aspect of my being. The channel is an important aspect of my being. It's an expression both of my intellect and my feelings, as well as my livelihood. So there's no, that someone who has no interest in that and isn't willing to familiarize themselves with it and at least hear your story, that she's gone. It cuts it down to what, like half a pinky worth of women out there, but it doesn't really matter because you gotta maintain those filters for the purposes of self-preservation.
Sure.
And and someone who's just not even vaguely familiar with MGTOW, they're just going to bring all this sort of blue pill nonsense that I just have no tolerance for, and they're going to expect you to kiss their ass and pedestalize them, and I just don't. Yeah. I don't have the patience for it. It's not that I'm insisting that I'm right. I'm willing to have a discussion about certain things, but they need to be at least open-minded enough to investigate and be interested on stuff at that level. So to me, that's another filter. So
I've talked to different women about it. I haven't mentioned the actual acronym, but of course I've discussed at length different risks and scenarios for men and sort of popular stories as well of things that are affecting men. But what I find with these women, they'll just agree with whatever point I raise.
They're probably just doing it for the sake of doing it. They don't really actually
exactly.
Agree.
But
and they're just thinking, Spetsnaz is so studly, I can't wait to have his cock in me. I'll just agree with him anyway.
I don't know how to formulate a response to that, but
you don't have to. I was going through women's minds there.
I mean, you're absolutely right, and you can read it, you can gauge it. So and I'm not saying that I'm looking for a mating partner or whatever. I'm throwing it out there that this is a desire that I have. This is something that I may want to pursue actively. I mean, I'm engaging with women at the moment, but I've always engaged with women. But I'm just saying that this is something that guys online need to start talking about because it's important. Because if we don't, we're just invalidating that desire. We don't want to do that because it's just shutting down discussion. We're not robots. We're not. We have desires. We have wants.
Robot, but.
Well, I've always liked transhumanism. I've always had a fascination with it, but I don't think you're part cyborg.
Maybe you're right. Yeah, no, I think women, I mean, if they just sort of nod their heads mindlessly, then, that's a bad sign. But, someone who's actually watched a few of my videos, who knows my positions on things, and actually can observe things in their own world. The feminist absurdities are good. It's not a perfect sign, but a woman who acknowledges the absurdities of feminism, that oftentimes can be a positive sign, for example.
I mean, because you're a fairly fearsome individual. The Stardust.
Not about that.
Well,
okay.
I'm coming up from a female's perspective. I mean, let alone a man who would just drop into the conversation about the gender wage gap, and it brings a woman to tears. I mean, we're dealing with someone like you, who was just, pure unadulterated truth. So it's...
Okay, I can give you a little anecdotal story. I mean, I've been told in conversation by women that I am intimidating.
Yeah.
But, whether I am or not, I don't know. I guess if that's their impression, that's their impression. But over time, I can mellow out. I mean, I think the intimidation factor in that context has a lot to do with the filter, because especially in the beginning of a conversation, when I'm just getting to know a person, specifically a woman, the filter is particularly strong because you have those primary prerequisites that are out there, and
right.
So the filter is up, and if those things are past that initial filter, then I become a bit more mild. But I can be really intense in conversation, and I'm pretty sure it can be really off-putting. I'm pretty sure for most women it's really off-putting. They want someone just to agree with them and blah 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 blah. But I think if women are willing and they're actually or have a normal rational conversation, it's not that I drop my filter, but I definitely become much more approachable, and it's been my experience with a few. So but I guess I can be intense. But that's my whole point. If they're not willing to, that's part of me.
Yeah.
If they're not willing to accept that aspect of things, then if they're not willing to accept the world as it is, if they think that women are eternal victims, or men are having a party, living life all the time, then they're fucking loonies, and so I just don't talk to them. So I don't. If the conversation always goes back to women, during that intense filtering process, and the suffering and blah 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 blah, it's just done for me. So if that's intimidating, fair enough. But once those initial barriers are passed, I don't let down my guard, but I'm more open-minded, and I'm much more just sort of informal and kind of just more interested in just hanging out. But there are those first couple of things, those first couple of conversations, which are usually deal breakers. They're make it or break it. For me, everything's about the conversation. I told you I put everything physical on the back burner for now, and it's all about the conversation. Where is it going? How is it evolving? Is she listening to me? Does she have anything to say of her own? That's another thing. I mean, women who have just nothing to say, that are completely empty, headed and vacuous. No time for that either. So,
well, it's interesting. It's that women still have these expectations have shifted, but some have still stayed the same. A woman still expects you to ask her out. She still expects this XYZ.
Yeah.
But it's they still have these expectations. I mean, if you, in a woman's mind, from my experience, if you're not having sex with her within the first 3 dates, you're obviously homosexual, or there's something wrong with you. So there's that too, and they construe that as female empowerment. There's all these twists and beliefs.
I don't date. It just doesn't interest me. Not that I care if they think I'm gay. Good for them. It doesn't really matter.
Sure.
There's none of that. I mean, I have my own method. Maybe I'm insane to have this method, but for me, it's all about the conversation. I'm not trying to get laid. I'm not particularly interested in getting laid. I'm trying to get to know a person, or a human being specifically, who happens to be female. And if she has enough of the positive traits and little of the negative traits that I'm accustomed to, then maybe eventually it'll go down that line. But there's no interaction at that level until the stages of conversation have been sufficiently explored. And
it's interesting.
So I don't know.
It's interesting that you're fitting the stereotype that women put out there of what they want in an ideal partner. Do you realize that?
Yeah, I thought about that. I don't fucking care though. I mean,
I'm just saying that what they say, what a woman wants, and what she says.
Well, I know I know female mechanics and all that stuff, but I've never, to be honest, it's weird. I've never been the kind of guy. I've never had a one night stand. I've never I've had a bunch of sexual partners, but it's never been just one off. Let's just fucking hit the sack and fuck. That never really interested me. Personally, I can't relate to it. I know a lot of guys can, but it just doesn't really interest me. It never really has, and even as I get older, it interests me less and less. Those kinds of casual, superficial sexual interactions. It does nothing for me. And the closest I've ever come to that were kind of funk buddies where the sex was pretty pitiful and I wasn't enjoying it, and it was just absolutely a waste of my time. So I think a lot of guys, and maybe I'm just speculating here, engage in that game just because that's what they're supposed to do, right? And maybe they don't want to do that. But for me, at my age, you just stop caring what other people, for the most part, think about you, what they expect of you, and you just do your own thing. So if I'm somehow playing into a role of what women say that they want, well, as long as I have my filters in check and I'm operating according to my system, I don't care. It's just a coincidence. Yeah.
Well.
So now we've come to this point. Anything, as we're winding down, since we've been at this for a while, anything else you'd like to add?
No, it's just thinking that if discussion is moving in this direction, it'd be a welcome sight. I feel just because I get so many messages, I can't respond to all of them. It's just guys that are in this boat. So it's good that we can actually bring this up. That they're
yeah. I mean, on a very final note, I'll say it this way: Who fucking cares what women want? You should care about what you want. And if what you want superficially somehow resembles what women claim they want, who fucking cares? Do what's going to work for you, what makes you content, what makes you feel comfortable. Yeah. I don't feel comfortable in superficial, annoying sexual interactions with women. I never have. I'm not interested in that. Never have been. And as I get older, even less so. And for me, it's about the conversation. And, maybe men think that's, pussy or fucking gay. And maybe women think that's pansy or unmanly. I don't fucking care. I do what I want to do, and I operate according to my own rules. And that's it. And that's what going your own way is all about. And I think other guys should be encouraged and should feel empowered to do the same thing, even if their rules are vastly different from mine. Maybe they're guys who like fucking 3 different women a day, then they should fucking do that. More power to them. I'm not interested in that, but it's fine if they want to do that. Yeah.
And, yeah, I mean, you've got it worked out. But what I'm saying is that I do feel the discussion needs to be moving in that direction as well. There's a lot of guys that they haven't got it worked out. And, yeah, they should absolutely, come to the point where, their needs are a priority. And other people's expectations, perceptions of them should fall by the wayside, absolutely, because they're not defined by that. It's just, I see a lot of men hurting. And, yeah, it's something that I think needs further discussion from men themselves.
I agree.
Because when you go into a group environment, facilitator takes a step back. The work is done between the men themselves. So if we can facilitate that discussion, move it in that general area, then I think men are going to come to maybe the conclusion that you've reached. Maybe another conclusion. It doesn't really matter as long as it's men working together.
It doesn't have to be my conclusion. I mean, I know everyone thinks I'm some sort of dictator telling what no. It's just not true. I'm just saying you got to find what works out for you and what's important to you. Like for me, it's being a gamer. So if you're not a fucking gamer and you're a girl, fuck you, piss off. Nothing against you as an individual, I guess, but stuff like that. Yeah. You just got to find out what works for you. And I should emphasize this, that the gaming thing is just pragmatic. I just, because I don't need fucking nagging. But
if she plays Sims, does she count?
Probably not. I'm only interested in someone who games reasonably similar games to me. But I think you just got to find your individual filter and what works for you. And everyone is different, I mean, maybe, like I said, you love casual sex and can't get enough of it, and, do it to your heart's content. However, you should be aware that, stick your dick in a woman and you're every time you're surrendering potentially your sovereignty and you're undergoing a lot of risk. But that said, men need to figure out what works for them as individuals, and you can figure out the general filters they need to apply to all women, no matter what their specific taste and interest. Yeah. And one thing I'll point out again is, our obsession with physical characteristics. I mean, it's natural to fixate on certain physical things, but throwing that out the window, at least to some degree, or putting it on the back burner might be a better way of putting it. That can be really useful, because then you really do focus on the conversation. I don't. Appearance is not something I'm particularly focused on, especially since I spend a lot of time on the internet. So that's helpful. You really focus on a voice more than anything else. And
there's one thing I'd say as well is when you start interacting with men, you understand what you've really been missing out on. I found that myself. And you will find, in comparison to the interactions you have with women, those interactions are going to be incredibly lacking in comparison. Those interactions with women have different benefits, but you're going to see the difference. So, I'd really encourage men to start building up those networks.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. Yeah. Generally speaking, a lot more beneficial. All right, guys, we're going to end it for now, but I think we're all appreciative of Spetsnaz taking the time and appearing on MGTOW Talks. He's a great partner, a conversation partner to talk to. A lot of interesting experiences, and maybe I'm almost certain we'll be able to do a talk like this in the future, assuming I get my internet fixed.
Yeah, great.
So, any final closing words before we close up shop today?
No, just go your own way.
Yeah, just go your own way. Don't think. Just go your own way.
No, I'd say understand, acknowledge, then go your own way. There you go. More clarity.
Yeah, that. I was gonna have to. Yeah, that sounds good. Understanding, knowledge, and going your own way. Okay, everyone, thanks for watching, and we'll check you out later. And you have a video uploaded on your channel, so I think so.
Yep.
Everyone, check out Spetsnaz's latest video. I'll be doing that later. I haven't done it yet. And take care. Bye bye.